We just got some new data. The biggest story in 2025, and our mainstream media is non-existent. They're not covering the story whatsoever. It's Canada's immigration plan. Imagine this. 16 fully loaded to the brim 747 jetliners landing in Canada every single day. Each jetliner has 416 people. And guess what? All of them have one-way tickets. And if for some reason there's a day off, that means a fully loaded 747 jetliner is landing in Canada every 45 minutes in this country, and they're all one way. And it gets even more insane. Our federal government is financially helping these people move here, travel expenses, and settlements. They're settling here. And they're providing these individuals with a 0% loan of up to $40,000. I don't know what Canadian gets a loan that's 0% interest, but this is the reality. So isn't that fantastic? The second that these new people come to Canada, they become immediately debt slaves to the system. Most of these people are coming to Canada because they're leaving a terrible place and they're coming here to have a better life in Canada. But in reality, they're coming to a collapsing Canada. This is not a fairy tale. This is not a made-up story. And where are these people going to live? Canada has a housing crisis. And our government's solution is providing Canadians with plywood shacks with these manufactured homes. And our seniors, they're giving them shipping containers.
This is exciting because I'm in front of a construction site. It's home to 55 seniors.
Shipping containers for seniors. There's no housing in Canada. It doesn't exist right now. It's because we've overloaded the system. And jobs? There are none of those as well. We currently have 1.5 million unemployed Canadians right now. Our economy is rapidly imploding. And our government is like, hey, everything is under control.
We have a plan, and our plan is working. 2.2%, Mister, in terms of growth in the last quarter. This is what Canada is about. It's about investing in our people. It's about investing in our industry. It's about investing in Canada. Mr. Speaker, not only we have growth, but we always have a triple rating, a AAA credit rating, Mr. Speaker. One of the two countries in the G7. Imagine, Mr. Speaker, that's a confident Canada. That's an ambitious Canada. That's the Canada we'll build together.
If you're tired of being lied to and you are seeking the truth, you came to the right place. Welcome to the show. My name's Mark Nixon. Let's get into the content. In just 4 months, Canada added 817,000 people. That's 200,000 people per month. That's not immigration. And no one, I mean absolutely nobody voted for this. Check out this article. This article's from December 12th of 2024. This is when our economy was bad, but today it's far worse with Donald Trump and everything that's going on. It says nearly half of Canadians favor mass deportation. That's half of Canadians. And 65% think there are way too many immigrants. Why? Because of housing costs and employment challenges. And that was from December. Imagine what that is today. And then we find out about this new information. Let's take a look at the numbers. So Canada added between January and April, so those 4 months, 132,100 were granted permanent residency, while 194,000 study permits and nearly 500,000 work permits, including extensions, were finalized by Immigration, Refugee, and Citizens Canada. Canada, you can't make any of this stuff up. So that is 200,000 people per month. If we actually annualize that, 200,000 times 12 is 2.4 million people. I can't even comprehend that amount of people. For reference, inside the city limits of Toronto, there's 2.8 million. In the city of Vancouver, there's 2.7 million. And Calgary's got 1.6 million. And Edmonton's 1.5 million. So think about it. Edmonton and Calgary could join forces, and that is almost as many people as we bring into Canada in 1 year when our economy is straight up in free fall. So let's recap. Unemployment is up. Wages are flat. Food banks are overwhelmed. Housing? Forget housing. And it doesn't matter. In 4 months, bringing in 817,000 people in such a short amount of time, it doesn't matter how many shipping cargo ships or containers, and it doesn't matter how many manufactured homes, you're not going to build enough for that many people. And here we are today with this insanity. And with all this happening, where's CBC, our main funded journalism, number one journalism in Canada? Where's CTV? Where is the outrage? Where is the front page news? Where is the panic? They're nowhere to be seen. They're too worried about Donald Trump and his tariffs. Let's take a look at the front news story of today.
Prail from the nation's capital. Colton, good to see you. What more can you tell us about Trump's latest tariff threat?
Yeah, we're getting this just in from the Canada-U.S. Trade Relations Minister as well, Dominic LeBlanc, who also just put out a statement on social media. And I want to read this and then highlight just something from Melanie Joly's in a moment. But Minister LeBlanc saying that Canada has taken note of President Trump's comments regarding the doubling of tariffs on steel and aluminum, saying that in the face of the economic threats posed by the United States, Canada remains resolute in defending our workers and communities. He goes on to say that as we negotiate a new economic and security relationship with the United States, Canada's new government will stand strong to get the best deal for Canadians. We will take as long as necessary, but not longer to do so. And what you notice in both his statement and the parts that I read and in Melanie Joly's statement is that there is not a clear response as to whether or not the government is considering further action on the U.S. should these tariffs come into place. And in part, that may be because these tariffs are not in place yet. We've seen Donald Trump speak about them yesterday and post about them on social media. He's talked about Wednesday, June the 4th, being the day that he would implement these tariffs. But as we've seen in the past, with the Canadian response to the U.S., the government has waited for those tariffs to actually be in place to see the executive orders before officially responding. And so at this point in time, we haven't seen the Canadian government outline a clear response, outline whether or not there's going to be an increase in the retaliatory measures that they've put in on the United States. But that's the key development to watch for. It's also something that we're seeing being called for by the steel industry to re-up the retaliation against the U.S. government, given the fact that these new tariffs, as Donald Trump put it, are specifically designed to ensure that people, as he said, can't jump over the fence. Essentially, at 25%, because of the way trade operated, the U.S. is incredibly reliant on Canadian steel and aluminum, and because of how much stronger their dollar was to the Canadian dollar, there were some companies who were essentially able to eat that increased cost, or it wasn't as harmful. By increasing the tariff to 50%, it becomes almost impossible to avoid, and it is going to pose a really significant challenge, not only for U.S. buyers, but for Canadian producers as well.
As you mentioned, it is sometimes difficult to know exactly what Trump is going to do. But that aside, what are we hearing about the impacts that this double tariff could have if Trump, in fact, goes ahead with it?
Yeah, well, here in Canada, you look at the amount of aluminum we produce, for example, just over 3 million tons a year, and just shy of 3 million of that is exported to the United States. You look at the amount of aluminum steel, I should say, that is being exported to the United States. It is a very significant amount. 24, almost 25% of all steel and iron imports in the U.S. come from Canada. And at 50%, it is an enormous threshold that you are asking consumers and U.S. customers to buy. And that poses a huge challenge for Canadian producers, so much so that the the Canadian Steel Association says this is essentially it for that market. Have a listen.
It essentially means that the U.S. market closes overnight for us. That means, in simple terms, 50% of what we produce heads to the United States. So that market will just shut instantly at 50%.
And that is a significant amount. As I mentioned, $7.6 billion of iron and steel USD is imported by the United States from Canada. That is a huge portion of the industry, and we're already seeing the impacts. Prices at 25% had already jumped 30% in the U.S. That obviously has an impact on customers. So Canadian steel producers are losing customers already because of these tariffs, and at a higher rate, they're expected to continue losing customers. You've already seen job losses and plant shutdowns, especially in the auto industry. Expect that to continue as well. The Canadian Labour Congress has suggested that should these tariffs at 25% continue for long term, we could see as many as 100,000 job losses. At 50%, you have to question what that number is going to look like. The other element to all of this is the government response. The steel industry is calling for stronger retaliatory tariffs, but they're also calling for a crackdown internally on Chinese steel dumping, making it so that there are cheaper options than Canadian-produced steel for Canadian customers and consumers. They're calling for government to try to crack down on that, so at the very least, if they do lose the U.S. market, there is potentially an opening in the Canadian market for our own produced resources. The government has attempted to crack down on Chinese steel in the past, but it still has been a concern, and it's also one of the things that the U.S. has talked about in their rationale for imposing these tariffs on Canada.
And as that news report just announced, that there could be 100,000 auto workers out of work, and the steel workers, those workers are going to have trouble keeping their job. There's only 23,000 steel workers, but that $7 billion hit to our economy is going to cause reciprocal damage to other industries that rely on that business. With our economy clearly in trouble and we're losing potentially hundreds of thousands of jobs, why in the hell do we have 500,000 people that are working here on temporary working visas? I know why. Let's take a look. Here's a chart from Statistics Canada. Remember Philippe Champagne saying our economy is on fire right now. We have 2.2% GDP growth. See, what happens is they offload all this immigration into Canada, lowering our standard of living, lowering wages, resulting in all sorts of havoc, housing, everything is crumbling. But we could show that we have positive GDP figures. But our GDP per capita has not increased in over a decade. That means you and I are getting poorer. And us Canadians are supposed to be grateful. We should be so grateful. We live in the best country on planet Earth. Work hard and be grateful, Canada. Pay your taxes and be grateful for the $9 strawberries I bought in the store today. The math ain't mathing. This is not about race. This is about the pace. Canada can't absorb all of these people without breaking something, and we are breaking. So what do we do next? There needs to be a game plan. Well, Jamal Giovanni, the Conservative MP, has started a petition.
Tried to talk to him, but, communication barrier just made it hard, and very nice guy, though. I see him again a year later in this most recent election, and he knows a little bit more English this time. And you know what he says to me? Too much immigration. And I said, sir, your English is impeccable. Now, he didn't know a lot of words, but he knew enough to get that point across because he knew what he was experiencing and feeling on the ground. He didn't have to be in Canada very long to see that. And that's what I'm trying to get across when I say what it looks like to bring common sense to Parliament. The first thing I'm going to do as the Member of Parliament for Bowmanville, Oshawa North, is launch a petition to end the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. This program has been a disaster for workers in this country. From January to October of 2024 alone, over 160,000 work permits were issued for this program. And a fraction of those for seasonal agricultural work might make sense, but the vast majority are putting a crunch on the workforce in this country. Youth unemployment hit 14%, the highest it's been in a decade, not counting COVID years. And a lot of young people are struggling to find their first job, their first opportunity in the job market. The wages for Canadian workers have gone down dramatically because of programs like the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. And I understand that the Liberals will say they've taken action on the immigration issue. Prime Minister Mark Carney just put out a mandate letter that said he wanted to reform immigration. But I think we need to hold them to a higher standard than just empty words. The Globe and Mail just published an article where economists are pointing out there are hundreds of thousands of people in Canada who have overstayed their visas, and the government has lost track of them. When we say the immigration system has some very serious flaws, we mean it.
In order to eliminate and end all temporary foreign labor until we fix our economy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the link to his petition in my comment section. Go ahead and sign it. I've already signed it, and I encourage all of you to do the same. Enough is enough. We need to fix this. This was a very serious show, and a lot of truth bombs were dropped, but it was an important episode. I look forward to providing all of you the next report.